of your dollar. You've heard Ron Paul talking about it, and it's true. You took what used to be the dollar when it was on a true gold standard, gold and silver standard in the early part of the 20th century, and how since 1913 it's had some ups and downs, but overall it's been a 96% decline of total value. Number 4, the Federal Reserve can bail out whoever it wants with no accountability. And the partial audit they finally got in Congress revealed that it's all the big banks of Wall Street and pretty much all the big banks of Europe. Go figure. Number 5, the Federal Reserve is paying banks not to lend money. Now, what does that mean? Section 128 of the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008 allows the Federal Reserve to pay interest on excess reserves that the bank parks at the Fed. So what happened? You had no excess reserves up until that act was passed in 2008. Now you have $1.5 trillion in there. The banks are putting the money in there, gaining interest payments, collecting their own money, and not loaning it out to people, not loaning it to small businesses, not allowing any kind of economic recovery. There isn't one. Paul Craig Roberts is going to talk about that later, what a hoax that is. Number 6, the Federal Reserve creates artificial economic bubbles that are extremely damaging. Do you remember that their whole mandate for being created was that they were going to stop the fluctuations, the spikes, the bust and booms, the market crashes? They didn't do any of that. The greatest crash ever, the economic depression of the late 20s, of the 30s, was created by the Federal Reserve. It wasn't stopped by them. They contracted the money supply and some other fishy moves after they crashed Wall Street. Number 7, the Federal Reserve System is dominated by the big Wall Street banks. Now, that should be obvious at that point, especially after the partial audit. However, I believe Jamie Dimon is on the board of reserves, and also, of course, Treasury Secretary Timothy Geithner came from there. At the very best, we're talking about a very, very corrupt revolving door system, but we know it's far worse than just revolving door problems. Number 8, it is not an accident that we saw the personal income tax and the Federal Reserve System both come into existence in 1913, so they could collect that interest money that Thomas Edison, Henry Ford, and so many other Americans, whether they're good, bad, indifferent, colored, corrupt themselves, whatever. It was 1913 they began to turn the lights out on the American dream. Not that we were ever perfect, not that we ever achieved that dream, but they turned us instead towards that Soviet model, toward the rule by central authority model, rule by private entities controlling the government, not by a government responsible to the democratic people of the country through reserved, limited powers under a republic. Number 9, the current Federal Reserve Chairman, Ben Bernanke, has a nightmarish track record of incompetence. Now, that can't be true. Number 10, the Federal Reserve has become way too powerful. Or was it always too powerful and completely unconstitutional? Crazy. But anyway, someone, a listener, sent us an interesting dollar here, some artwork. Ron Paul's face on a dollar bill, and it says, "And the Federal Reserve." I don't know if we could show that. Hopefully we can zoom in. Interesting artwork there. Just a little something extra for our viewers out there. We appreciate everyone supporting this broadcast and trying to spread the word. On the back it says, "In gold we trust." Interesting there. Anyway, that's it for tonight's INFOWARS Nightly News segment. We, of course, have Dr. Paul Craig Roberts coming up. But first, I want to read you a daily quote after reminding you we're extending our special discounts on the Prison Planet TV membership. A lot of people like to sign up that way because it costs less. You could save money. Of course, you can share that membership with up to 5 other people, so you can give it to friends, family, other people who are awake, other people who you want to try to awaken. It's a great tool of giving information, of giving truth, as we try to reach enough people to turn this thing around. You know it's so important, and if you want to help this broadcast, please check that out and consider subscribing. Now, Marcus Tullius Cicero, of course from the Roman days, wrote, "The traitor appears not a traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their face and their arguments. He appeals to the baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is less to fear. The traitor is the plague." And I believe the quote goes on to explain how at least they come out in the open. You can recognize that kind of enemy at the gates, but the enemy within the gates is a lot harder to deal with and a lot more evil. And that's the kind of enemy we face today. I hope you're beginning to inform yourself out there, and I hope you'll keep tuning in to our broadcasts. Stay tuned. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts after this break.
Greetings, fellow Info Warriors. Alex Jones here, announcing the first of many trips that I'm going to take across this wonderful United States that we live in. And we get so busy here at INFOWARS.com, the nightly news, the daily radio show, the documentary films, and all the other things we're doing that I tend to never go out and give speeches anymore. And I've got a lot of ideas bubbling around in my head about the history of the New World Order, what makes them tick and how to defeat them. So I'm titling this key speech I'm going to give. It'll run around 2 hours long, Blueprint to Defeat the New World Order. And we're also going to have a surprise premiere of a short documentary film we've been working on at the event. First off, I'm going to be going to Dallas, Texas, Sunday, February 19th, 2012, to the historic Lakewood Theater. And the next Sunday, February 26th, I'm going to be in Orlando, Florida. You can find out more about the events and buy tickets at INFOWARS.com/events. Now, unfortunately, every event I've ever had, we've had to turn people away. So get your tickets early at INFOWARS.com/events. There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in this world. And the craziest of all is this explosive awakening. I can't wait to meet you and shake your hand. I'll see you in Dallas and I'll see you in Orlando. INFOWARS.com/events. I'm signing these evil 1776 flags. Doesn't get any more out of control than that, ladies and gentlemen. It's pretty un-American what we're doing here at INFOWARS.com. I mean, not only are we promoting liberty, but we're selling 1776 flags. Now that is Al-Qaeda.
And we are back from break. Joining us now to discuss the large buildup for war as well as a number of economic issues is Dr. Paul Craig Roberts. He was Assistant Secretary of the Treasury for Economic Policy under Reagan. He's worked for the Wall Street Journal and a number of other publications and organizations. He now has his own blog at paulcraigroberts.org. Doctor, thank you for joining us.
Pleased to be with you.
I'm pleased to have you as well, but not too pleased about the apparent buildup to war. It's been said, obviously in a different context, no man knoweth the hour, but still we see quite the buildup. What do you see on the fronts, sir?
Yes, buildup's been going on a long time, and it seems excessive if no attack on Iran is intended. You know, Juan Cole published a map showing that there are 44 American military bases surrounding Iran. We've got 2 fleets assigned to the Persian Gulf along with NATO warships. We've got American troops posted to Kuwait and Israel. We've got a missile defense system up for Israel. We've got missiles in a variety of our Arab puppet states. So it looks like a war is intended or attack is intended. You know, it used to be military strategists would say that once mobilization had reached a certain point, war was inevitable. I don't know if they still teach that or not, but that was once the view. And in terms of that view, it certainly looks like war is inevitable.
Yes, sir. Now, in the lead up to the Iraq war, we saw a large propaganda effort to sell us on the ideas of mobile weapons labs and WMDs, all of which turned out to be false. Here we've got basically the nuclear case, but they haven't even been hitting that as hard. Do you expect a further propaganda buildup prior to a movement, or should we be looking to things like false flag attacks and other coming conflicts short of all-out war?
You know, I don't know how it will start. In fact, it may start despite the White House's opposition to the timing. There's so many people in a position to start the war with a false flag attack or anything else. You know, there've been several books published about how President John F. Kennedy came near to being sandbagged by the Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CIA into a Cuban invasion and into a nuclear preemptive first strike on the Soviet Union. He saw in time what they were boxing him into and rejected it. And it's entirely possible there could be a false flag attack, even one orchestrated by the Israelis that would force the hand of the United States. In my own opinion, I don't think Obama wants to take the risk of a war with Iran because of the possible disruption of oil, the escalation in price, and this would have serious effects on the United States and European economies. I don't think he wants to take that risk unless polls show that he's losing the election with whoever the Republican candidate turns out to be. So I think he would prefer to wait. Others probably see the spring, early spring, as a prime time to attack because Russia may be in turmoil over its elections. You know, the Russian elections are in March, and the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations funded with the American taxpayers' money from the National Endowment for Democracy, that's how much of the Russian opposition is financed. And so they're already having demonstrations accusing the upcoming elections of being fixed. So if Putin wins, you could see more demonstrations, and they could easily turn violent. And you could see Russia sort of paralyzed by the kinds of upheavals that we've seen in other parts of the world recently. And this would make them ineffective, perhaps, in responding or attempting to block or forestall an attack on Iran. And I'm sure that those planning the war would be more comfortable if they had Russia preoccupied with its own internal problems. So there'll be some conflict, I think, between what some people will see as an ideal time and what Obama would see as an ideal time.
Right.
And the outcome's not predictable.
I think that's a wise observation to put Russia in context. I mean, obviously there's geopolitical points on the map of interest, but you've also got the General Wesley Clark account. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but he cites a meeting with Paul Wolfowitz in, I believe, 1991. And Wolfowitz laid out a hit list of countries, Iran, Syria, they were all on the list. And his reason for the timing had to do with Russia and other superpowers not being in a position, at least of interest, to intervene in Middle Eastern interventions and conflicts.
Yes, I think they still think a lot about that. And of course, on February 14th, the Vice President of China is coming to Washington. And how that meeting goes would probably also feed into the decision. What we have to come back to is we've had all these years of propaganda, and the people making these propaganda claims against Iran know that they're not true. You may have seen some of the latest propaganda claims that come from congressmen and senators in Washington who are talking about Iranian influence in South America, that the Iranians are now penetrating South America.